Hello, ICCAM. It's great to be speaking with you today. This is Paul Wischmeyer, and I'm a professor of anesthesiology and surgery at Duke University, and I'm thrilled to be here today to talk to you about how the microbiome and probiotics will change the world and perhaps treat COVID-19. These are my alignments. Some would call them conflicts. I hope they're alignments of interest that help support my research. And what we want to focus on today, we spent a lot of time talking about antibiotics and how to eradicate bacteria, but I'd like to impose upon you or have you believe that bacteria are 100 trillion friends that we didn't know we had and that we want to keep around, and that perhaps we should think about how we should give back bacteria to our patients and perhaps to ourselves. And there's a lot of information about giving bacteria and perhaps stool back to patients and to ourselves to care for ourselves. Things like fecal transplants. There's books about how you can use your own stool to improve your health perhaps, and perhaps we'll be prescribing stool and poop pills and probiotics to our patients very soon with the data that we now have. And perhaps even this will make a big difference in treating and preventing COVID-19. So why should you care so much about your microbes? Well, have you ever wondered why you get bitten by all the mosquitoes and your wife or husband don't when you go in the woods? It's not because you're sweeter. It's because the bacteria that live on your skin attract or repel mosquitoes. And in fact, we're finding out that the bacteria that live inside our bodies, inside our colons, our intestines, may even decide who we marry or have sex with. In fact, we know this is true if you're a fruit fly. So we may find this out about humans as well. And how do they all do that? How do bacteria, why are they so important to our bodies? Well, what is it that makes us human? Is it our cells that make us human? Well, we are 30 trillion human cells in the average body, but 38 trillion microbial cells. So cellularly, we are more bacterial than human. Perhaps you think it's your genes that make you human. Well, you have 20,000 human genes right now sitting in your home or wherever you are, and 20 million microbial genes. So we are 1% genetically human and 99% genetically bacterial. So we're posed to answer questions about our bacterial selves and how we can use them to improve our health. And so this brings back the question, what's in our patients' guts? Can it help or hurt them? And what happens to it when we get sick? Well, we know that many of the things that happen in the ICU derange and impair our microbiome or our bacteria. They lead to what we call dysbiosis. And these are things like sedatives, opiates, phos levels, vasopressors, psychological stress, and all the things that go with being in the ICU. And so perhaps to restore this balance that critical illness and other things, antibiotics cause, we need to be giving back probiotics and resodding the lawn that's blighted, the normal bacteria that are killed with probiotics, stool transplants, or poop pills. The kids at MIT will sell you their poop in a pill and tell you that it makes it smart, it will make you smarter. The FDA has some questions about that, but it's interesting nonetheless. So if we're going to use probiotics and microbiome-related drugs, how should we do it? It needs to make scientific sense first. And what is the science? Well, we know that when a patient becomes sick, that pathogens grow up. All of us have Pseudomonas living in our guts right now. And when we become sick, pathogens grow up quickly. And they can talk to each other and they can recruit other pathogens. And so we lose our normal bacterial flora. And this leads to an invasion of bad bacteria, much like when there's a hurricane in the US and all the people that live in the city leave the city and looters come in and begin looting and they bring their looting friends. And so this is a problem. What we think is if we can give back normal bacteria through probiotics or stool transplants, what this does is it quickly outgrows the pathogenic bacteria and it protects the gut and tells those looters that have come into the city and their bad friends to go away. And just like looters leave the city when the people come back, it's true for bacteria as well. And probiotics have a lot of direct effects on both viruses and bacteria. There's many mechanisms by which they reduce infection and protect our bodies at the fundamental level against infections and injury. So what about things like COVID-19, respiratory infections, and pneumonia? Well, my laboratory has had a long interest in this, and we've used Lactobacillus GG and bifidobacteria to show that you can use probiotic treatments to prevent mortality from pneumonias like from Pseudomonas. And you can see this data here. We significantly prevented mortality. And in fact, when you give these probiotics to the animals after giving Pseudomonas, you can eliminate the bacteremia and the BAL positive settings. So you can see this pneumonia animal who got Pseudomonas has a lot of bacteria in their blood. The animals that got Lactobacillus GG have none. And we repeated this study many times, and we also showed it was true in peritonitis. And it protects the lung. You can see the pneumonia lung that didn't get probiotics looks like an ARDS lung, where the probiotic lungs do not. And so what's the mechanism that begins to underlie this? And so we know that For instance, Treg cell responses reduce the injury that pneumonia causes and the ARDS that it causes and the death it causes. Well, probiotics increase Treg cells and help regulate the proper response to a major injury to the lung. And so this is one of the pathways amongst many we think it works by. This is a start, basic science, but not sufficient. So how do we do this safely? We have to make sure giving back bacteria is safe. Well, the US AHRQ, Health Research Quality Institute, went looking for the harm from probiotics, thinking they would find it. They looked at 622 probiotic studies, and what they found was there was no risk of adverse events, even in studies that go on for more than a year in healthy patients who get probiotics. You can see no relative risk of adverse events at all. In fact, in sicker patients, there was less adverse events in people who got probiotics, like critically ill patients, versus patients who didn't get probiotics. The Propatia trial is a trial you've probably heard of. It was a pancreatitis trial that gave probiotics and fiber to the small bowel post-pylorically. And these patients got bowel ischemia because those boluses didn't move. And so what we learned from this study that showed some risk of doing this was do not give probiotics post-pylorically in patients who have poor motility. So again, you want to always give them to the stomach. But the conclusion of this HRQ document was 622 trials shows there was not a risk of probiotics. They were very safe and in fact may be beneficial the more sick you are. So what happens to the microbiome in critically ill patients? This was a study, the ICU Microbiome Project, that my group did with a number of other groups around the world and published recently with Rob Knight's group. He's a real maven in the probiotic field. And we found extreme dysbiosis. This was our first publication, 115 ICU patients, 4 centers across North America, mechanically ventilated more than 48 hours, and everybody got antibiotics. You can't be in ICU in North America for more than 48 hours and not get antibiotics. And you can see our results show that there was significant derangement with the ICU patients in blue and the normal healthy patients in red that were our controls. There was significant derangement of the microbiome and massive change happened in just a few days. And unfortunately, the mouth, the skin, and the gut began to look the same. So we lose our barrier function, we lose our diversity. You can see normally there's a great deal of spread in the small dots between those 3 body areas. They all come together as we get sicker. And there's a massive increase in pathogens, those red lines coming down to the pathogens and the normal bacteria, the greens and the blues. And there's massive loss at ICU admission and discharge of the normal bacteria and the growing of the pathogens. So does this not only affect physical outcomes or infectious outcomes, but does it affect how our brain works, delirium, depression, and other cognitive function? Well, we know that the bacteria in our guts transmit or generate neurotransmitters. We call them psychobiotics. And so there seems to be a significant effect on delirium potentially and depression from probiotics. And so you can treat this as well. So the cognitive symptoms may be relevant as well. Does it improve clinical outcomes? Well, the clinical data says giving probiotics in large meta-analysis data, this is a JAMA paper looking at probiotic use for diarrhea, 12,000 patients, reduced antibiotic-associated diarrhea by 40%. With good safety. So again, large meta-analysis exist. This was a prevention trial the NIH funded looking at lactobacillus GG to prevent ventilator-associated pneumonia. Reduced ventilator-associated pneumonia by half, 50%, in patients who got lactobacillus GG, and this was in the intention to treat group, and C. diff diarrhea went down as well. This is a meta-analysis my group did. Again, significant reductions in infections in many trials. The sicker you were, the more you benefited because we think the more your microbiome is deranged. You can see there were a lot of studies that went into this and significant reductions in infection. This is true in sepsis, elective surgery, trauma, and many other areas where probiotics have been shown to be safe and beneficial in clinical outcomes. And this is the landmark trial you should know about, especially when it comes to thinking about COVID-19. This was published in Nature, 5 full pages in Nature. This was a 4,500 healthy infant study done in India looking at Lactobacillus plantarum plus a prebiotic versus a control. And this showed a 30 to 50% reduction in respiratory tract infections and sepsis and death in those healthy subjects that got a probiotic versus those that didn't. Massive effect. And again, significant improvements in the primary outcome of sepsis and death, 40% reduction, significant reduction in lower and upper respiratory tract infections, including viral infections. This seemed to have a big effect on viral infections like COVID-19. There's another large meta-analysis in Cochrane showing that probiotics reduce respiratory tract infections by almost 50% when they're used in large populations. And again, they reduce the length of that as well. The length of the respiratory tract infection shortens. It's a 10,000 patient meta-analysis of symbiotics, pro and prebiotics, again, reductions in respiratory tract infections. So we need clinical trials of this in COVID-19. We at Duke are doing or starting a number of trials. You can see them all here. One of the trials we're enrolling is prevention of COVID-19 infection in family and caregivers of positive patients. But we're also looking at hospitalized patients. We're looking at nursing homes and a number of others. We have an IND for this. So this is a real drug study we're doing with Lactobacillus GG. And we've secured all the product we need. This is the first trial, probiotics to reduce transmission. We're trying to modify the microbiome, and we're doing microbiome measures. Every week, we're having them send us their stool and a nasal swab for PCR for COVID, and we believe we can reduce symptoms and transmission significantly. This is our website. If you want to learn more about the study or if you want to participate, please feel free to reach out. You can see we're collecting stool and nasal swabs every week in the study and collecting the other things online. So what have we learned so far as we close? Well, first, a healthy gut is a diverse gut, and that the ICU and critical illness leads to a significant loss of diversity of the gut microbiome, which is associated with a poor outcome. We need to correct this. We need to be treating this. This is a fundamental part of who we are. We really live in a bacterial world, and we can change this world. And we think we can have a big effect even in COVID-19 and reducing infections and helping people around the world safely and cheaply do that. So perhaps there is something to prescribing poop or prescribing probiotics or poop pills to our patients, and we can resod the lawn that's deranged by antibiotics and restore balance. And now with the modern microbiome analysis technologies, we can make it so easy that a child can do it. And so I want to thank the groups that have helped me do this research, the Night Lab, who helped me do the ICU Microbiome Project and many other things, and Tony Sung, who's working with me on the COVID-19 research trials of probiotics and the microbiome. With that, I'll be happy to answer your questions. Feel free to reach out on Instagram, Twitter, or email if you'd like some of these papers or have anything you'd like to ask. And I look forward to hopefully probiotics helping us fight this pandemic and improve our ICU patients' care's outcomes. Thank you.